Day 1131 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 914,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,510 in the past day. Then as for hardware, 14 tanks, 20 APVs, 56 artillery, 2 rocket launchers, and 130 soft targets, which includes the likes of this type of vehicle, an almost 75-year-old Gaz-69. Production started in 1952. And with this example, Russia is clearly preparing to send to the front. No Western analogues indeed. Now to the map, and starting in the Russian capital, because an Urus Senate sedan, part of Russia's presidential fleet, erupted in flames and smoke overnight in central Moscow. The blast, occurring near the FSB headquarters, raises some serious questions about the security in the heart of the capital. And given the FSB's notorious reputation for surveillance and control, this incident suggests a significant breach in security, indicating Moscow's undercurrents of dissent are escalating. Then on the map and headed all the way across to the Russian exclave region of Kaliningrad, or at least the bordering nation of Poland, because Russian telegram channels, as part of their perpetual cycles of switching between fearful and aggressive rhetoric, have concerned themselves with Polish armoured vehicles positioned just beyond the border, apparently sporting a tactical X sign. They also concern themselves with the additional military aviation transfers to the air bases in the nearby Polish city of Malbork. Now, there are indeed some NATO-related defense exercises coming up for Poland next month. However, it must absolutely also be noted with the image here, the tactical X sign you can see is a fake. The original image dates back to 2006. Even the background was modified, meaning that it creates the impression that Poland is on the verge of invading Russia, thereby potentially serving as a component of disinformation efforts. It's no different with Ukraine at the onset of the SMO, with Russia falsely claiming that Ukraine was the aggressor and Russia the victim. This is exactly how they legitimize their own aggression in their own minds. Then headed across the map to Kursk, where the Russian forces advanced in Russia to a limited extent, just south of the town of Sudzha. Also, AFU paratroopers captured 5 Russian soldiers within the same region, which might come as a surprise, but does go to show the still active combat nature on this axis. Next, and still within Kursk, we saw how a Russian recon drone recorded the moment of a Russian Lancet UAV strike on a Western-supplied Ukrainian Striker APC. The APC survived the attack and continued moving forward, appearing rather unfazed after the blast. But what's perhaps most difficult to ignore for this region is where Kursk volunteers are handing over all the essentials for the landing force from their 76th Airborne Division, where the video narrator behind the smartphone camera specifically mentioned the inclusion of body bags and goodies, which are in short supply, quote unquote. And as for those goodies they refer to, vodka. Now, Russians and the Russian army have traditionally been plagued by the stereotype about excessive vodka consumption. And yet, in seeing this, it's almost like it's happening on an institutional level, receiving that assistance to take a sip. Moreover, it also speaks to their army's low level of morale when 2 key items being shipped off are body bags and vodka. It's remarkably fascinating to see. Then headed across to the Ukrainian map, where Ukrainian forces repelled a sizable Russian attack with a large number of civilian vehicles and motorcycles on the Seversk front of northern Donetsk. One of those civilian vehicles was green in color, technically speaking, but by no means camo green, and stuck out like a sore thumb. The vehicle type is a ZAZ 969, first produced in 1962. What are you doing, Russia? A bright green vehicle sent off to invade another country like it's a weekend Miami beach drive. Once again, the Russian army continues to outdo itself, but not in a good way. Further down the map we head now, where the AFU adjacent telegrammer channels continue to assess the enemy's shortage of personnel and equipment in many of the settlements along the front contact point at Pokrovsk. It's led to a battlefield environment that's been assistive with the AFU performing clearing operations in some settlements that we've seen on this front most recently. On top of that, it's been reported that Russians are losing infantry faster than they can replace them, largely as a result of Ukraine's drone isolation of those front lines, where Ukraine has established 30 to 40 kilometers logistics denial zones with their quadcopters and supported by artillery. The practical outcome to this has led to 50% of Russian material never reaching the zero line in these areas. As such, if positions are captured, it's extremely difficult to consolidate due to this type of denial of logistics. And on that topic, Russian sources themselves have also reported FPV attack drones reaching up to 40 kilometers behind the front lines, which is an absolutely staggering distance when you think about it, because if you contrast that with Russia's Lancet UAVs, like the ineffective drone seen used earlier on the Striker, those UAVs have a range of about 40 to 50 kilometers depending on the model, but the difference is they're not designed for traditional FPV drone frontline deployment and exist in much lower volumes. It's a medium-range UAV platform instead. So in other words, Ukraine's small frontline quadcopters are innovating in flight range to the level of Russia's long-standing medium-range drone varieties. It's an impressive advancement. Then to take a look more broadly at the map today, as we see here Russia's use of their Shahed UAVs against Ukraine, this one becoming neutralized. But most notably here is these Shaheds sometimes come without an actual warhead, instead using plywood discs. For the time, the reason is unknown, although one might argue that these are decoy drones, but that's generally considered unlikely given that Russia, in the past, has been using significantly smaller and cheaper UAVs with a poor RCS or radar cross-section to make them stand out better against the backdrop of these much more costly Shaheds. So something has to be happening at their manufacturing facilities for these warhead-free Shaheds to exist. Perhaps there's high weekly output quota demands, direct from the Kremlin. Irrespective of manufacturing supply chain constraints on materials, corruption may play its role too. Then also, in the east, two tanks were seen moving towards Ukrainian positions, sometimes referred to as Mordor tanks these days, and in this example, the Ukrainian defenders of the Shadow unit dispatched them. Two lonesome and practically open field main battle tanks. It's an extremely vulnerable scenario. Then headed across to a little bit of news today. So Ukraine has achieved full alignment with the European foreign policy and defense strategies as of 2025. The European Union confirmed that Ukraine has met all of its international obligations following the completion of legislative screening in March. This marks a significant step in Ukraine's European integration process, paving the way for the opening of the External Relations Negotiating Cluster, which is part of completing its path to EU membership. As a result, this development not only strengthens Ukraine's ties with the EU, but also enhances its geopolitical standing amid all of the ongoing regional tensions. As Ukraine continues to integrate with European structures, it is likely to see increased support and cooperation from EU member states, further bolstering its defense and foreign policy alignment with the bloc. Then headed across to some Ukrainian hardware news updates, as Ukrainian manufacturers can now produce over 4.5 million FPV drones annually, as per an update from presidential advisor Alexander Kamyshin. Now, currently, one manufacturer rolls out 4,000 drones daily, thereby single-handedly producing almost 1.5 million units per annum, but also noting that there's almost 150 producers within the country. Furthermore, Kyiv is developing cost-effective missile drone hybrids, with President Zelensky most recently ordering a whopping 30,000 of these faster, higher yield, and longer-ranged drones for 2025. Ukraine will surely switch gears in peacetime to emerge as a competitive player on the global high-tech stage, for both software and hardware, and become a player that competes with many Asian markets. Then to a similar hardware update, Ukraine has developed an FPV with radio direction finder capabilities. Two antennas are mounted at 60 degrees to one another to help the FPV operator locate radio emitters such as enemy FPV operators and EW jammers. The operator then attacks the emitting target when locating visually. Ceaseless innovation from the Ukrainians. But then to some of the more classical stylings of hardware news, as Ukraine has secured a substantial cache of Soviet-era shells and rockets from Syria, according to a Russian war blogger. These munitions, likely sourced from the former Syrian Arab army's stockpiles, appear to have made their way to Ukraine via Turkey. The Vault 8 Telegram channel reports that Ukrainian forces now enjoy a significant ammunition surplus for their legacy Soviet artillery systems. This newfound abundance allows for a strengthening of tactics, including mass salvos from Grad systems reminiscent of their early 2022 operations. Then headed across to a Russian hardware update, and a little bit of dark humor to round off the video today, with some quality tactical gear updates coming out of the Russian Federation, who presented an infantryman's suit for transporting two TM-62 anti-tank landmines. Now, firstly, the TM-62 mines are 10 kilos each, or about 22 pounds each. Secondly, and leading on from the first point, this is not exactly a practical design for a modern army. And yet, one could suggest that this latest Russian innovation points to one of the last things Russia would ever run out of. Or two things, rather. The first, people, if they can fully mobilize, and the second is the TM-62 mines, never any shortage of those on either side. As such, from Russia's standpoint, this newfound methodology could really represent some real bang for buck, especially given the Kremlin's and the Russian MOD's complete lack of value for the life of their own infantry. You could even say these designs are battlefield tested too, because about 4 or 5 weeks ago, a story came out from a Russian mother of a soldier that was sent to the SMO, where due to his non-compliance, he and another had 2 of these live TM-62 landmines strapped to their bodies with duct tape, in much the same way. If I can find that photo, which I've shown before, I'll pop it up on the screen, though it's been unusually difficult to locate again. Now, as for these two guys, they were forcefully commanded to become one-way mission martyrdom operations, or last stand assaults, if you will. But luckily for them, they cut themselves free. But ultimately, for this latest news, at the end of the day, these designs reek of desperation, rather than ingenuity. With Russia's armoured vehicle reserves dwindling after untold losses in Ukraine and sanctions crippling their ability to produce modern replacements, the Russian MOD is grasping at straws, arming infantry with outdated and risky solutions to compensate for a lack of tanks, transport, and firepower. Russia has just outdone themselves twice in one video day. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe. Thanks again for all of the support, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!